Thank you all for coming to the Guerrilla Reading Series. Dixon Place is a nonprofit that fosters artistic community in New York City and has generously supported the Guerrilla Reading Series for several years now. Due to COVID-19,
circus arts,
theater and lounge have been closed since March 13th, but they've been creating a wonderful lineup of virtual programming, which you can check out at dixonplace.org. And we also want to share that Dixon Place is now certified to accommodate media production and welcomes any inquiry to that. So you can go to their website and contact them if you're interested. Dixon Place began as a literary salon in 1985 and continues that work today with the Guerrilla Reading Series and other literary programs. The box office and bar usually covers much of Dixon Place's budget, but months of closure due to the pandemic mean their programming is being sustained solely by donations. So please consider contributing if you can. The link in the chat window will show you how you can contribute to Dixon Place if you are able, and we appreciate that. Now I'm going to hand it over to Lee Matthew Goldberg, who will introduce each of our readers.
Start again. I want to thank everybody for coming out on Zoom tonight. This is Guerrilla Lit's last reading of the year. We have 3 great authors for you. So let's just get started. Nobody wants to hear me talk anymore. Let's go right to the first one.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, should I just dive in, Lee, or?
Put your bio up so I could read it. Your great bio. So I'm just waiting for that.
It is up.
I see it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'll take it away. Andrea Scrima is the author of A Lesser Day. The German edition was published in, I am not going to be able to pronounce that, in Austria in 2018. The German edition of her second book, Like Lips, Like Skins, will also be published in the fall of 2021. She has worked in several anthologies, including Wreckage of Reason and Strange Attractors. She's the recipient of a Writers' Fellowship from the Berlin Senate for Cultural Affairs and writes a monthly column for 3 Quarks Daily. She is editor-in-chief of the online literary magazine StatORec. Please welcome Andrea.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm going to give a very, 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 very short intro to why we're here tonight. We've put together an anthology based on the Corona issue at StatORec magazine that we began in mid-April. We published altogether 31 authors and 30 pieces. 3 of us are in this anthology, myself, David Winner, who is my co-editor, and Rebecca Chace, who also helped us edit the issue. And this is what the book looks like. There it is. So I'm going to read a small excerpt from my piece. I had come back from Florence at the very end of February of this year. Everything was semi-normal by the time I came back to Berlin, and a week later, the entire world was turned upside down, and I, like many people, found myself stopping what I was doing and having to recalibrate everything, and I began writing about what was going on and wrote my essay, and of course that turned rather quickly into this idea of doing an entire Corona issue. And then I asked David, what do you think? And David said, I don't know, and wrote his piece, and it just kind of snowballed from there. So we've been spending most of the year doing this, and we're very, very happy to see this publication come out. Okay, going to begin now. The name of my piece is Corona Report. This is, I'm starting sort of two-thirds of the way into the piece. 3 days before Italy's first recorded death from COVID-19, the UEFA Champions League soccer match between Bergamo and Valencia, which Bergamo's mayor Giorgio Gori would later identify as the decisive biological bomb, took place on February 19th at the San Siro Stadium in Milan. 44,000 fans crowded together to watch a game that had been heavily promoted as the largest in Atalanta's history, holding up signs that read "Insieme da sempre, insieme per sempre," always together, together forever, and cheering wildly while thousands more gathered with friends and family to watch the game on TV. Although the first domestic cases had already been confirmed, the coronavirus was still seen as a Chinese epidemic. Unaware of the danger, a third of Bergamo's population hopped in their cars and chartered buses, clogging the roads and causing 3-hour traffic jams on a stretch of highway that normally took 40 minutes. When Atalanta won, fans were delirious. Jubilant, they flooded the streets and squares of Milan and crowded into the bars and restaurants of their hometowns to celebrate, hugging and singing and drinking well into the night and the next morning, and turning virtually all of Lombardy into an epicenter of the pandemic, as 2,500 disappointed Spanish fans who traveled to Milan for the game flew home, carrying the virus with them. In the press, Atalanta's managing director defended soccer as important to the country's morale. Today's results prove us right, he said, following Bergamo's 4-1 victory, and our city deserves it. Our boys will go down in history for society and for all of Italy. By mid-March, when this turned out to be true, albeit not for the reasons the team's manager had envisaged, I realized just how close I'd come to contagion. The day a third of Bergamo's population flocked to the San Siro Stadium was the day I left Florence to travel to Grecci, the village my grandfather Luigi emigrated from nearly 120 years ago, and that he never returned to, that his mother, Maria Luisa, never returned to, that none of his 9 Bronx-born children, including my father, had ever seen, none of their children had ever seen. Had I boarded the Frecciargento in Bologna the following morning, the train heading south from Milan, I wouldn't have sat next to Fabio during the 4.5-hour trip, but quite possibly a hungover soccer fan who'd spent the night reveling and was now headed home, snoring in his seat. In which case, it's likely that I would have caught the virus and passed it on to Rita and Pino, my hosts, would have passed it on to their son Luigi, who drives the town's ambulance, passed it on to Aldo and the rest of the staff at the Comuna, from where it would have spread to Grecci's overwhelmingly elderly population. 3 weeks later, just as Bergamo counted the highest number of COVID-19 deaths in the country, a third of the Spanish soccer team tested positive for the virus, and the number of dead in Valencia had reached more than 3,000. Bayern München was still planning to play Union Berlin until the Bundesliga, having come under heavy criticism, finally called off the match. In the case of the Atalanta game, signs of the impending pandemic had appeared well ahead of the event. On the Regionale, I took from Florence to catch the Frecciargento in Bologna in the early morning of February 19th. Trenitalia broadcast a solemn announcement that it was taking the danger seriously and was implementing all necessary precautions, but when I got up to use the toilet, I was puzzled to find the soap dispenser empty. The first cases had already emerged, but the coronavirus was still seen as something essentially Chinese. Italy had already suspended flights to and from China at the end of January, and in Florence, I saw Western tourists trying not to shrink from the remaining groups of Asians crowding the Uffizi and the rest of the city's museums and churches. The prevailing perception was that the virus was something intrinsically alien. People feared that the nearby city of Prato and its huge Chinese immigrant population would become a hotbed of contagion. As it turned out, those first weeks of February were the calm before the storm, a period of incubation. Although the precise starting point of local virus transmission, in other words, Italians infecting Italians, remains unclear, there were ample warning signs that a mass event like the Bergamo versus Valencia match should have been canceled. While xenophobia flared up under the threat of the coronavirus, anti-Chinese sentiment had been brewing for some time. As Chinese immigrant manufacturers successively replaced a once thriving Italian textile industry, a region that had traditionally voted left now swung sharply right. Successful for generations, family-run artisanal businesses in Tuscany, Umbria, Marche, and Emilia-Romagna went bankrupt as Chinese sweatshops began manufacturing cheap copies of their designs. When Italy's recent trade agreement with China resulted in a total export deficit of 20 billion euros, populists jumped in to decry the foreign invasion. But then, when the northern countries didn't come quickly enough to Italy's aid, the arrival of the virus brought about a sharp reversal, replacing anger at aggressive Chinese business tactics with a new wave of anti-EU rhetoric. In mid-March, I was struck by the image of Pope Francis walking through the empty streets of Rome, flanked by security guards. It was a pilgrimage to pray to the Salus Populi Romani, situated in the Cappella Paolina in Santa Maria Maggiore, a Marian icon attributed to Saint Luke, brought to Rome by Saint Helena, and said to have saved the city's people from the plague during the papacy of Gregory I. Francis then walked to San Marcello on Via del Corso to offer flowers and pray to the wooden crucifixion, accredited with having stopped a resurgence of the plague in the 16th century. 2 weeks later, in the presence of these two holy artifacts of the Catholic Church, which had been brought to the Vatican for this purpose, Francis gave his Urbi et Orbi blessings in a rainy and deserted St. Peter's Square, reminding the city and the world that we hadn't been shaken awake by wars or injustice, nor had we listened to the cry of the poor or of our ailing planet. It was 2 weeks before Easter, and I suddenly recalled that my son and I had been in Rome at this very time the year before, when the Notre Dame Cathedral caught fire and the image of its flaming roof and the smoke darkening the Parisian sky and the startling footage of its spire collapsing branded themselves into our minds like a terrible omen. That's the end of the excerpt I'm going to read today. So
much.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Andrea. Wow, that was very powerful and sobering. Thank you for sharing it. Our next reader is David Winner. David Kirkus recommended novel Tyler's Lass concerns Patricia Highsmith and Ripley. His first novel, The Cannibal of Guadalajara, won the Givell Novel Prize and was nominated for the National Book Award. His writing has appeared in the Village Voice, the Iowa Review, the Kenyon Review, Fiction, and several other venues in the US and UK. Winner is the fiction editor of The American and the senior editor at StatORec.com. His third novel, Enemy Combatant, is scheduled to come out early next year. Please welcome David.
Thank you very much. This is called, I'm doing it the old-fashioned way with the actual book. This is called The Daisy Assassin. For years now, I've run up and down stairs in Brooklyn parks. An attempt to stave off a middle-aged paunch has morphed into a serious endorphin addiction. My favorite steps lie on Lookout Hill, right behind a statue of George Washington in the eastern corner of Prospect Park. Sometimes I climb with my big yellow mutt. Sometimes I climb alone, not focusing much on passers-by, except when joggers, families with children, and those damn bird watchers get in my way. Then came COVID. My 88-year-old father, alone in Charlottesville, told me he wasn't so concerned about protecting himself as he'd lived a long life and was content to die. And my uncle in Rome, nearly blind in his mid-60s, ran out of food in the midst of the Italian catastrophe and was taken in by friends at the 11th hour. Back in Brooklyn, I grew concerned about my 6 feet of separation, just a little less than the space between people if they hewed to the edges of the stairs on Lookout Hill. Bravely, I traipsed up and down, risking my ankles if I were to miss land, and my skin if I were to tumble into the thorny vines off to the sides. Foucault famously discussed an enclosed segmented space in the time of plague, observed at every point in which the individuals are inserted in a fixed place, in which the slightest movements are supervised, in which all events are recorded. The stairs did not resemble the space that Foucault describes, a circular medieval prison called a panopticon, and no one other than myself is observing the young white family that blocks my way one morning. Not the little boy, 7 maybe, moving dangerously close to me as I boil with self-righteous rage, and imagine their attempts to reason with him in the parlance of educated Brooklyn parents. Do you think you really should be getting so close to that man, Harrison? Can we discuss this? At that moment, while I'm fighting the good fight in Prospect Park, a friend's body in Sunset Park hurts so much he can barely move. All essential activities, urinating, defecating, swallowing, seem impossibly painful. And in England, in Leicester, the brother-in-law of a friend gasps for breath. Weeks later, well after his ostensible recovery, he staggers onto my friend's Skype session and staggers away, exhausted by the effort. Another family on the path kindly but firmly directs their kids to stay away. When I run by the handsome blonde father, both of us keeping to the edge of the stairs, I praise his and his wife's childbearing as if I were broadcasting from my lookout post in the panopticon, encouragement for correct behavior, punishment for infringement. My college closes and I start teaching remotely. Shelter in place is mandated. Most stores close, but liquor stores remain open, making affluent Park Slope resemble 70s working class Black Washington, according to an acquaintance's Facebook post. Largely acidic, Borough Park is one neighborhood away. Many New Yorkers, particularly secular Jews like me, view Hasses as insular, patriarchal, just plain weird. But I once flew from New York to Warsaw on a plane full of Lubavitchers who were visiting the ancient village of their Rebbe. Over the Atlantic in the middle of the night, I was awakened by dozens of dancing, chanting, exhilaratingly mystical men. While the overseers of the Panopticon are on a break, hundreds of members of the Hasidic communities of Borough Park and Williamsburg attend a wedding. Infection spreads to the descendants of Holocaust survivors determined to repopulate the Jewish race. More than 6 feet, I try to give them 12, those carriers of the plague. Jill, my wife Angela's cousin, Jim, her husband, and their teenage daughter all have it. They seem okay, but share a house with Angela's 97-year-old aunt. They self-quarantine, but they could already have given it to her. Meanwhile, my father goes one last time to Whole Foods. Those over 60 are supposed to stay home, and he's nearly 3 decades past that. I imagine the market ringing with disapprobation as he clings to his cart like a walker, but he tells me that no one seemed bothered. My leadership in the Corona Panopticon is out of character. I'm not generally so obedient. I bike through red lights and onto sidewalks. My dog can be the only one off leash in the park. Not a risk taker, just a minor league lawbreaker. But back in the park, in the last day of March, I've come up with a list of rules. Winner's rules of order govern running up and down Lookout Hill. Perhaps I can create a makeshift signpost that demands that in the name of public safety, all families must congregate in open areas to avoid blocking trails and stairs. All children over the age of 3 must be informed that they should stay out of people's way and be given, no not beatings, I'm a liberal guy, heightened timeouts if they fail to comply, some offshoot of Guantanamo's heightened interrogation. No individual shall pay so much attention to their phone as to ignore social distance. All couples must, and so forth. Perhaps the park can build me a treehouse so I can root out disobedience from above. Really though, the primary rule breaker is myself, or at least I'm exploiting a loophole. Dog walking and exercising shouldn't entail so many hours away from home, running up and down stairs. Far from Lookout Hill, authoritarian governments exploit the crisis. Viktor Orban has seized even more power in Hungary. Janine Áñez Chávez has postponed Bolivian elections. A friend I've made in Iran tells me that our government and regime don't give a fuck about the people. We are hostages, not citizens. Stateside, Trump's bizarre populism may be more dangerous than his authoritarianism, denying, lying, and stalling as Corona spreads. I don't know whether he's still calling it the China virus because I can't stand to listen to him. A wife of a friend, an RN from the Philippines, takes a car service from Queens to Mount Sinai on the Upper East Side, not so much because she fears infection, but because Asian people are getting harassed on the train and around the hospital. The parents of a Filipino student of mine who was mistreated in Rome, but I guess I can't blame Trump for that. One night, Angela and I get mad at each other. But I cook all the meals, I scream. though it isn't true. But they're terrible, she rejoins, which is true, though she later takes it back. A text chimes. Jill's husband, Jim. Jill's blood oxygen is at 86%, and they fear intubation. When Angela's father was dying from COPD and lung cancer, when my mother was rasping for breath in her last days, their levels were nowhere near this low. This is terrifying. Angela's phone dies, and we, still mad at each other but panic, search madly around for a charger, scaring our dog. We find it, power up, and text Jim back. He does not respond. My cousin Frank in the West Village also has it. Not nearly so bad as Jill, but he is in his 70s and smoked much of his life. His job, trumpet player for the Metropolitan Opera, sometimes on stage in ancient Egyptian attire, may have kept his lungs strong. My father and his much younger half-brother in Rome always complain about the media hype of hurricanes, blizzards, and the like. In the early days of the plague, I joked that if they somehow survived World War III, they would pick themselves out of the rubble and declare it a cable news exaggeration, a favorite phrase of my uncle's. My father and I receive a dictated email from him declaring that it's good that he is semi-blind, so he can't see that Italy's great humanitarian effort is folly. My father, alone and anxious, has jumped off that bandwagon. It no longer seems exaggerated. The peak is upon us, and I refrain from Lookout Hill. Jill is better. After several days in the hospital, she is being released. She is exhausted, though, and speaking is difficult. Frank continues to improve, but tells me that his recovery has not been linear. My uncle cannot return to his own apartment because corona has been discovered in the condo and the place has been quarantined. He writes to say that the TB epidemic of 2018 killed more people, but that nobody wants to listen. Without my Lookout Hill endorphin fix, I'm getting depressed, irritable. I return to the park wearing a mask, even though it's uncomfortable, swearing to stay not 6, but 9 feet away. Most risks have immediate consequences. If you get caught in a riptide, you drown. Not that afternoon, not the following month, but then. But if I catch a dribble of corona sputum on Lookout Hill, I may wake up one morning 2 weeks later, not with one of the mild sore throats that have been scaring me, but a deep exhaustion so I can barely make it to the bathroom to pee, a compression in my chest so I can barely breathe. On the stairs, a man deep in his phone approaches me. He walks right in the middle. Even if I slide by him, hewing to the side, I'll be much closer than 6 feet. So I jump off the stairs into the underbrush, feeling morally superior. Look what I've done to avoid infecting you, I silently address him. I glance down at my feet to see what's below them in case I might trip on vines or stones. There aren't any, just dozens of beautiful spring daisies. When you were very little and we lived on Wurtland Street, says my father, more and more upset by the administration's response, there was a woman who lived across the street, quite mad and a nymphomaniac. She came over in the evenings with absurd stories of people on the street plotting against her. One couldn't call the police. She's Trump. It's a glorious sunny day in the park, mid-Passover. There are hundreds of people and many Hasids. It is slow going on the stairs. I have to stop often to keep proper distance. Sometimes I have to jump off them, steering clear of daisies. Friendly dogs come my way, but I must not pet them. They may carry the virus on their fur, or I could be carrying the virus, bringing it to their owners. A Hasidic girl, 14 or 15 maybe, and a Hasidic boy of about 10 are walking below me on the stairs. I have paused to allow them to pass, but the boy inexplicably turns around and dashes towards me. When he's only a couple feet away, I plunge off the stairs, losing my balance and possibly murdering more flowers. The boy has turned around again and begun to head back to his sister when the words, "Excuse me," flee my mouth without proper input from my brain. No adult is around. The girl is the closest thing. I can see her hesitate. She hears me, but doesn't know what to do about the strange man addressing her. "Excuse me," I say again, and she stops and looks up at me. "Can you tell him," I pontificate, gesturing towards her brother, "can you tell him to stay away from people?" The expression on her face still haunts me. Confusion, fear. I must have looked so terrifying in my sweaty gym clothes and ridiculous mask. She may not have seen how close her brother had come to me. She may not have known what this all was about. This could be the anti-Semitism that she's been warned about. Do I want her to wear a gold star? Will I shatter her family's shop windows, drag her, her brother, and her parents to some place resembling the camps from which her great-great-grandparents had escaped? Trump urges people to liberate themselves from quarantine in Michigan, Texas, and Virginia. As the two people who look into my father in Charlottesville may be Trump supporters, I beg him to stay clear. There's silence on the phone. Well, he says, I'll do my best. There's nothing more I can do. I can bark down at the disobedient from my treehouse. I can terrify teenage acidic girls. Virginia is hundreds of miles away, far from my panopticon. The next time I find my way to Lookout Hill, I regard Washington's ominous words emblazoned upon his statue. Good God, what brave fellows I must this day lose. Of course, I don't know the future of myself and the other not so brave fellows and females on the stairs. But the community college classes I've been teaching remotely for weeks have taken a dark turn. My students live 2 rivers away from me in impoverished, ungentrified neighborhoods in Jersey City. My middle-aged white mug appears on their computer screens like some big brother figure as I feel obligated to show myself, but very few choose to reveal their faces or their living spaces. Fewer and fewer of them log on, only about 20 still participating out of the 60-odd students in 3 classes. Awkwardly, I've asked my classes how everyone was doing, and have received bracing, if non-committal responses. Okay, fine, okay. Then I get an email from Gregory, living with his mom and stepdad. He's too upset to deal with the stupid assignment I've concocted about Corona because his cousin and his aunt have died and his mother has tested positive. Tears well up in Gregory's eyes the next time we encounter each other on Zoom. 2 students have it in an evening class. One participates from home, the other sleeps through most of the days. A student from Turkey and another from Morocco report to the class about the shit shows in their countries. The following day, April 23rd, I learned that sweet Adriel, who came from Ecuador as a toddler, is doing poorly. His father, who is younger than I am, has just died from it. Angela and I speculate about what we don't know. Adriel's father may not have had the luxury of working from home. For him and so many other immigrants from the global south, the problem may not be being overzealously monitored in a panopticon, but being sent out to work in the dangerous world outside, which is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Our last reader for the night is Rebecca Chace. She's the award-winning author of 4 books: Leaving Rock Harbor, Capture the Flag, Chautauqua Summer, June Sparrow, and The $1 Million Penny. She also writes plays and screenplays in addition to essays and reviews for many publications, including the New York Times Magazine, New York Times Sunday Book Review, the Huffington Post, the LA Review of Books, Guerrilla Magazine, MidHub, and NPR's All Things Considered. She is the Associate Professor in Creative Writing and the Director of the MA Program in Creative Writing at Literature at Fairleigh Dickinson University. Please welcome Rebecca.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here and such an honor to read with Andrea and David. Thank you. Okay, this is called Mask and Gloves. Today a man died in front of our building, or maybe he didn't. It's spring 2020 in Brooklyn, New York. Yesterday the death count was only 46. The day before it was 61. Up and down have replaced north and south on the compass. I opened our front door, masked and gloved, inhaling pine sol from the spray bottle we use on the doorknob we share with other tenants. The man's body was collapsed against a small iron gate separating our line of garbage cans from the rest of the sidewalk. He was curled on his side and his exposed behind was facing us. We were on our way to install an alarm on the door of my elderly mother's apartment, where she lives with 24-hour caregivers working in shifts. My mother has Alzheimer's, and she'd wandered out of the apartment the day before. She got downstairs and halfway down the block, no mask, no gloves, before her caregiver caught up with her. "Where am I going?" she asked. "Home," said Pearl. At 86, with emphysema, if my mother gets the virus, she will die. My first thought when I saw the man in front of our doorway, what if he has the virus? My second thought, is he alive? I've lived on this block for 5 years. My husband has lived here nearly 20, but we will always be outsiders. White artists who moved into the neighborhood because it was what they could afford. Our street is a main artery toward the subway station. There's a needle exchange and drug counseling storefront around the corner, a halfway house, and 2 low-income housing buildings with a sign in the lobby forbidding anyone to enter except tenants and their guests, as if this wasn't true of all buildings. A large public housing project 2 blocks away has the words gardens optimistically included in its title. The tall leafy trees swaying over the sidewalk in front of the house are often used as urinals. Men lean against their forgiving trunks and drink a bottle from the liquor store across the street. But this man wasn't leaning or pissing anymore. He came to a stop right between the tree and the front door. Walking over and past bodies on the street or subway platform is not new to me, practiced as a subjective form of heartlessness. Who do I give money to? Why don't I carry sandwiches to give out? When do I swipe someone into the subway? Depends on my mood, how much cash I have on me, and how late I am as much as anything else. Some people I can't walk past, some I'm afraid to touch. I haven't ridden the subway since mid-March. I'm employed and working from home, unlike many of the people on my block. The backside of the man with his pants falling off was brown and clean. Most of the people on my block are black or brown, so the fact that his body was clean was something I paid more attention to than his skin color at first. He was clean, his clothing looked new, and he was wearing shoes. This was the list of facts which made me assume that he wasn't homeless, though he could be an addict come to the neighborhood to score, or a drunk sleeping it off. How many of these assumptions am I willing to question? How many make it possible for me to live in this city? I turned my eyes away from him, pity mixed with revulsion at seeing someone too far gone to pull up his own pants. Of course I couldn't touch him. We called 911 and stayed 6 feet away, waiting for an ambulance to come. I could say that the 6-foot distance was social distancing in the time of Corona, but that would be a lie. I would have kept my distance even if I wasn't afraid that he was carrying the virus. He wasn't moving. His eyes were closed, face pressed against the sidewalk, no mask or gloves. Was he still breathing? I couldn't tell. I was born in this city, in a broken nation built on slavery, where Black and brown people are dying in greater numbers from this virus than white people. I've been shopping and delivering groceries as part of a grassroots response to the pandemic, but I volunteer with an after-school group, not the local needle exchange, because I'd rather spend time with children than junkies. Growing up here, I was taught that it was safer to step around fallen bodies. I avoid thinking about it, as I avoid the bodies of strangers. Most of us move like minnows on the sidewalk, trying to maintain the 6-foot distance even with masks on. We step onto a stoop to let someone pass or into the deserted street. How narrow is the sidewalk? Is she wearing a mask? Is she even looking? I give way to everyone, afraid of becoming a vector to my mother and afraid for myself. When a Black man walks toward me, I nod as I step out of the way, feeling like an idiot. As if a nod can mitigate all the times white women have crossed the street as he walked toward them. Sometimes they nod back, sometimes they don't. This is New York. You get everything and you get nothing. There has always been a virus that people are afraid to catch. There are maps showing the demographics of who has left the city in plague time. My mother's caregivers take the subway to come to her apartment in Manhattan. One of them lives in Brooklyn and one in the Bronx. They're both from Trinidad, and one of the questions the home care agency asked me, trying to find a good match for us, was if my mother was racist. I'm sorry, they said, but we have to ask. No was too simple an answer. So was yes. Standing outside, waiting for the ambulance, another man rushed up, no mask, no gloves, and put his arms around the fallen man, calling him by name. We told him that we'd already called 911, but he pulled out his phone anyway, panicked. He kept hugging the man and talking into the phone to the dispatcher. He was fine 10 minutes ago, about 40 years old. I was just coming back to get him. Wake up, wake up. We could hear the sirens heading to our address this time. Someone came out of the shop on 4th Avenue. Does he need Narcan? We've got some in the shop. Do you know how to do it? Aren't you supposed to just shove it up their nose? I don't know. What's Narcan? It's for when you OD. But how do we know? The sirens got louder. Red and white lights disappearing in the cold spring sun. The EMT jumped out of the ambulance wearing gloves and no mask. He kept talking about it later. Did you see? The ambulance guy wasn't wearing a mask. Do you think he has one? Maybe they ran out. He had gloves on. Yeah, but no mask. You think they're out of masks? We watched the medics bring a stretcher and move the man from our front gate into the ambulance. Did they put the dead into an ambulance? I suppose they must. What do I know of this man? He collapsed in front of my door in the middle of the day. Someone knew him and we called an ambulance. It might not have been the virus. Could have been an overdose. Could have been a heart attack. He might have made it through. There's a woman who sits on the corner across from our building and screams for hours, harsh, repeated cries. She's white and dresses like a young girl in a flimsy dress, sweatshirt and sneakers, but has the face of an old woman. She squats on the sidewalk, bare-legged, nursing a bottle with her red shopping cart next to her, plastic bags and bits of cloth fluttering from her wheeled metal companion. We heard from the local deli guy that she's not homeless. She has a room in the big hotel on Atlantic Avenue, which isn't really a hotel. There's nobody to call for her. The deli guy told us that when he calls the cops, they don't come. It's not the pandemic. They never come when he calls. Some days, the whole city is screaming through the throat of this bare-legged woman, and I'm not proud of it, but after a while, I put on my headphones. She's still there, but it's been quieter on the corner for weeks now. The empty buses don't stop, and the birds seem louder. I want to thank the first responders, the delivery people, and the birds. I keep seeing him every time I open the door, his back curled like a question mark. Wake up, man, wake up. He was fine just 10 minutes ago. I was coming to pick him up. What was he wearing? A friend asked. What she meant was, did he look destitute? Was he bare-legged, cracked feet, ripped shirt, fly down? He was dressed normally, pants and a sweatshirt. Oh, and he wasn't wearing a mask or gloves. Coda. About midnight last night, 50 cops in riot gear ran down the street in front of my building, chasing protesters. In 1 week, the sound of ambulances in deserted streets has pivoted to the sound of chanting and police sirens. The virus doesn't matter since George Floyd was murdered. Fires burn, combusted by this forced compression of racism and death. In the streets where we stand and march, there is no distance between us now, though most of the protesters are masked and most of the police are not. One sign, magic markered on cardboard, the cops will kill me before COVID-19. We hand out bottles of water and cola. The cola is for the eyes in case of tear gas and pepper spray. Last night, we brought our garbage bags back inside from the curb so they can't be used to start a fire. Even the corner store, which never closes, pulled down their metal shutters before dark. The sign with the rainbow on our front door, thanking first responders, sanitation workers, and delivery people, already seems like a relic from another time. Before going out to protest last night, I nailed a new sign to the tree in front of the building. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or does it explode? Langston Hughes. By the time I came back, just as the first curfew imposed on this city since 1943 took effect, I saw that the sign was gone. Maybe someone took it to a protest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I want to thank all of our great readers for these really amazing essays, and really just puts you back to that moment in time just a few months ago in a lot of ways. So please order Writing the Virus. There's links in the chat room. And what we're going to do now, as we've been doing in our Zoom Guerrillas, is we open it to the audience. If you have any questions, either you could just go ahead and ask, or you could put the question in the chat box, and I'll ask the readers. So please, if you have anything or just a comment, we'll do that now. Or I'll just ask a question. Okay. Here, so Olivia asks, how did this anthology come about?
Should I answer this? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
This anthology came about, we started with one essay, and then we added another essay, and then we added another essay, and we started asking people that we knew to write about the time now. It was this unique period of time. We had no idea what was ahead of us. We've all gone through this incredible experience together. It's really been this global collective experience. And as we were at the very beginning of it, many of us thought that we couldn't really focus on the rest of the work that we were doing. And it took on this kind of an immediacy. We had to do this. So we began publishing works that were written now and asking writer friends to write something more or less now. And people were grateful for the opportunity to do that, because everybody had the same need, really, to address this time. And it was a very intense experience, a very intense editing experience in part. And we were literally writing these things and publishing them with, I think, at a rate of 2 per week for 6 months, 6.5 months, 7 months. So that's pretty much how it started. And then at some point, I asked David if we should try to do an anthology, and he said, no, it's too much work. And he was right. But we did it anyway.
You know, it really creates such a timeless time capsule that even if books are written in the future about the pandemic, they will be looking back, and to have this work with over 30 writers literally writing it at the moment that it happened, it's phenomenal. I'm so impressed by what you've done and the dedication. And I mean, to go through and to hear just the, you know, the tragedy of each of them, I imagine how difficult it was to edit, and really just to thank you for doing that. So we have a few more questions coming in. The next one is from Kelsey Parker, who asks, what was the most challenging to each of you while you were writing your pieces?
Well, maybe I'll start with that, because Kelsey's one of my students. I have several students here, and thank you for coming. It's so nice to see your names out there. I'm honored. Well, Kelsey, I guess for me, and this was actually came out of a really wonderful and important conversation I had with Andrea when I first submitted. I won't go on and on about it, it's a longer story, but essentially the first draft I submitted to Andrea, I wasn't really, I was avoiding the topic of race. I'm just gonna be honest. I was avoiding the topic of race because I had this feeling that even though the man who collapsed in front of my house had brown skin, I thought, well, if I talk about race, it's gonna become, quote, all about race. And I was trying to write about the virus, I guess. And I of course, I knew the facts about, you know, that more Black and brown people were affected, and all the, you know, socioeconomic reasons for that. I was reading the newspaper, you know, but Andrea pushed back in a really helpful way to me. And our conversation led to a revision that, you know, led to a really, you know, a wider conversation that actually I've talked about with my graduate students, and led to a much better final draft. And so that was the hardest part for me. Was well, it was hard, but it was also the best part. I got to say that was both I learned the most, and she pushed me as a writer in a way that was made it a better piece. So it was a really good editorial experience for me.
I'll try to.
I would add a couple of words to that. On the other end of that experience is a very, very important experience for me as well, because as an editor, you really risk an author writing back and saying, okay, I'll get back to you, and then not hearing from them again, because not everybody wants to hear criticism, or not everybody wants to engage in this kind of intense sort of back and forth. And with Rebecca, it was actually really incredibly affirming experience, and it reinforced my approach, I think, in a pretty fundamental way to the entire anthology, to the entire Corona issue of the magazine, and then to the anthology. And so we had a lot of, we didn't know each other in the beginning, and now we're friends. And it's been a long road that we've all sort of traveled here together. But it did definitely confirm me that I needed to move out of my own comfort zones and really question these texts. They were being written really in the moment. Everything is sort of vibrating with this incredible immediacy. None of the authors had the luxury of letting a text sit for a couple of months and having another look and editing, which would be the normal thing to do, to see if it stands the test of time. None of us knew if anybody would be even mildly interested in reading their own pieces after 6 months. The events were just catapulting forward, and time began to shrink in strange ways. And so this kind of very intensive editing experience became part of the entire process. And I think that working with Rebecca early on in the issue was a big reinforcement to that. So that's all I wanted to say.
Add one thing to that, that Andrea did almost all the editing and conversations that she had with writers about their work, of course, became conversations about what's going on right now. What's going on right now was just so overwhelming for all of us. So it was not like a sort of normal kind of editorial back and forth. To go back to original question for me, I would say there was something in the Times soon after the virus got bad, sort of telling writers that don't write about this, implying truthfully that could be really exploitative, it could be really shallow, it could be artificial. And I did really embarrassing thing. I found on my computer late at night, I had written the name of the novel it's coming out soon with COVID. I somehow was going to put COVID in it, which is a very embarrassing, ridiculous thing to try to do. So I would say that the thing about it is that so much of what we write, particularly in its nonfiction, it's kind of presumed that we are talking about some experience that we have had that maybe others have not had. And any writing that's done about these moments, about COVID, about anything going on right now, we're such a universally shared moment for all of us that what was struggle for my essay was just to realize that, anything I talk about is not going to be unique to me. I just can try to describe what I'm going through and try to be honest about it.
Yeah.
We have another question. This one is from Paul S. He asks, how does the newest spike affect you emotionally, psychologically, relative to the time you focused on in your writings?
Oh, that's a hard one. Anybody?
What news spike?
Yeah.
It's hard to assimilate that. It's hard to. It's happening so fast, and it's just so terrifying. And I don't know what to say.
I think in New York City, for everyone who's in the New York area and New Jersey, this area, the weather's just gotten like super cold today and tonight. And I think that has made it, I'm certainly very aware of that and being nervous about heading into, before it was like March I haven't experienced November, December, January, February. And I think that we've been living a lot outside here in the city, as all of you city people know. And I think I'm thinking about it. I haven't processed it at all as a writer. I'm just trying to get ready as a human being, right?
I think for me, it's gotten to the point where I see the virus and the viral political situation as a single continuum. I mean, we've written about this also. It's become almost indistinguishable in a certain sense. There's this insanity going on a political level, not only in the United States, but the crazies are coming out of the woodwork here too, and protesting against something. I'm not quite sure what they're protesting against. Good government that's managed to keep the numbers of deaths comparatively low when compared with other European countries. But the second spike does frighten me, I have to say. I think that we're in a very, very different place now than we were in the spring. I live in Berlin, so I'm speaking from Germany at the moment. But in the spring, it felt that everybody was sort of still willing to cooperate, and there was a sense of solidarity and a sense of people sticking together and a solemnity about it also. We applauded health workers from the balconies, as you all did as well, you know, and it was a sense of awe that nature was telling us something, and we were hearing this message, and it was very, very humbling. And I don't think that we're anywhere near that now. I think that we don't have this innocence anymore with the virus. I mean, we've seen some very, very ugly things happening over the last half year, last 8 months. And I think we are in a very different place now. And I just hope we make it through the winter without civilization breaking down, basically, at this point. Paul, I don't know if that answers your question, really. Yeah.
So does anybody have any further questions? The rest was just really everybody in the chat area just thanking you all for your contribution and what you've done, and really just moments from each essay that were, you know, very powerful and stood out. And if there's no more questions, I think we'll close for the night. And the season. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Andrea.
I just wanted to say one of our other authors is also here, Joe Salvatore. I just wanted to say hello and point you out.
You read for us before. Two months ago, I want to say, 2 months ago about, yeah.
Joe was the very last author that we published in the Corona issue, and it was really getting very, very, very down to the wire, and I'm so unbelievably glad that his piece is in the anthology. Yeah.
Well, we also have Alice Stevens and Barbara Fishkin and a few other people who are in the. Wonderful. Yeah, you kind of have to scroll along, but it's so supportive and wonderful that you guys came, and thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it's really, really good that you're here. Yeah. I can't see the images, but hi, Alice, and hi. Hello to all of you.
Barbara's. Okay. And thank you to Dixon Place and to Guerrilla Lit. I mean, I love Dixon Place. Because I'm a New Yorker, I've been going to Dixon Place, like, I don't know, I can't even practically remember when I didn't go to Dixon Place, and it's the best. And we're so glad that it's gonna survive. We're all gonna survive. That's how I feel. We're all gonna just be our gritty selves, and we are going to survive, and it's going to be fine. It is not a ghost town, man. That's all I have to say. And yay Dixon Place, and yay Guerrilla Lit.
Kind of
okay. Good night, everybody.
As bleak as things look, that nope. Okay.
Oh, what were you going to say, Lee? I want to hear what you're going to say.
I guess time ran out. No, I was going to say, thank you for ending on, things are bleak and things are bad, but you do look at New York City. It's going to be in the 60s this weekend. There's going to be people out in Central Park and distancing and having a good time and living life as much as possible while trying to be as safe and cautious. And I think that's an important thing to get across as well. New York's not going anywhere.
That's right.
Yeah. You just have to make it through till the 20th of January.
That's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
God almighty. No, it's like the whole world is holding its breath, you know.
But at least that, like, you know, this could have gone in a very different way 2 weeks ago, and you know, at least we could be thankful for that, because that I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
No.
All right.
Mega anxiety, I think, on, you know, in a lot of people's minds and hearts for a long time. But my God, you know.
Yeah, it's been a rough 4 years.
Yep. But it's really good to thank you so much for hosting us. Really, I just have to say again, because it's been really a lot of like tears and blood and sweat, you know, went into this project somehow, and it's we didn't see it coming. We just sort of slipped into it, and it snowballed, you know.
But like I said, it gives the ability for it to be, you know, like a timeless thing forever. There will be books written about COVID, many books and essays, fiction, this and that. They're all going to be looking back on it, and to have something that you've created and that you've all been a part of, that literally, you know, hearing, like, I was listening to when David, you were reading your essay, and you're afraid about coming near a person and this and that and touching this, and it just brought me right back to like how I was, you know, in April, and how much I've kind of changed since then, where yes, I put on a mask and I wash when I go home, but you know, I'm able to pass by a person without freaking out now. And like that, it just snapped me right back into that moment when I didn't leave my apartment really for, you know, 3 or 4 weeks. And I think the immediacy of writing it when you were experiencing it really will set this collection above, you know, all the rest that come after it, and all the blood, sweat, and tears. You know, you're journalists, and you created, you know, a capsule of that time, and that's pretty amazing.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Of course.
You know, it's a different feeling now that this thing is out in the world. So we hope we find readers. We hope that people can relate to it, and that it gives some relief in a certain sense, you know, sort of a sense of people not being alone in what they experience. It really runs the gamut, I think. There was one piece that we don't actually have in the anthology. This was a Swedish author who wrote about actually having COVID, and she had sold the Swedish rights to one of the newspapers there, and we couldn't get although we translated it into English for the issue, we couldn't get the print rights for it. It was too complicated. And
one of the best.
That's maybe the one position in the end that's missing, is this report of it's something like I forgot the exact title, but part of the title is, and I thought my body has failed me and now I'm going to die, I think is the title of the piece. It's a pretty gripping piece, but I think that the anthology kind of covers a pretty wide range of different experiences and subjects. And I really hope that we will have learned something from this. I sometimes wonder if, you know, if we're all just knuckleheads and we're not going to learn anything from anything, you know. But
well, if 72 million or 73 million people voted for Trump, I think.
Yeah.
Knuckleheads.
Question to ask, right?
Yeah, this is it. Yeah. This is it's hard to feel any happiness or euphoria. You can feel a little degree of relief, but the damage that's been done, I mean, it's going to be really, really interesting to see how we all piece it back together, you know. So let's all just pitch in, I suppose.
But you look at other sort of eras where they dealt with horrific tragedy, and then what came out of it. You know, you had like the Renaissance, and
exactly, yeah.
You know, yes, 70 million people are crazy and awful, and you know, maybe they'll wake up someday from this cult. But they also can't control our own feelings and what we want to accomplish. And you know, I hope that this sort of new renaissance comes out of this. even looking around New York City, people are kinder to one another. I completely see that, like in every way, shape, or form. People are helping each other out. Maybe it's a testament of New York, but you know, I hope that that kind of spreads throughout the country, especially to these areas that hadn't really seen the detriment of COVID until now, and now we're dealing with it. We're, you know, we saw it so early and we learned how to kind of, you know, deal with it, and now that, you know, they're struggling, and that maybe that'll sort of change their perception about it. But I do perceive really great art and all of that to come out of this time when people are ready.
Yeah, Florence is a really good comparison, because I mean, after the Great Black Death, you're right. You know, it's the Renaissance followed in the footsteps of that devastation. It's really quite interesting to think about it in those terms. I hope we will have learned something. I really do. What I remember most of all from the spring, when everything was new and shocking and we were all sort of very solemn and still obeying the rules. People hadn't started sort of their uprising against the corona measures and so on and so forth. I remember feeling like that there was some kind of almost holy opportunity at the moment, or a chance, like that nature was speaking to us. I don't mean in an esoteric way, but that there was this major cataclysm happening, and we were being humbled as a species, and that it could be this brilliant, beautiful, once in a lifetime, once in a millennium opportunity to finally get back on track somehow. You know, it was incredible when the airplanes stopped flying overhead, and it was, you know, the sky was as blue as it had been 10 years ago when the volcano erupted in Iceland, and all of the airplanes were grounded for a week or 10 days or something like that after. Just a feeling of the whole planet taking a pause, which, I mean, how often does that really happen, that the whole planet says time out, you know? And it felt that there was so much wealth of opportunity in that, and that we haven't really, you know, I mean, maybe in retrospect we'll see where we did pick this up. I don't know, but it's here it's, you know, in Germany, it's definitely back to business as usual. I mean, we have a semi-lockdown. Everything but stores are closed, but the major concern is the economy, you know. So it's like the economy, everything is about the economy, and there's not a lot of soul searching taking place anymore, I'm afraid. But anyhow, I don't want to end this on a depressing note, though, because Lee, you've been so good about sort of bringing it back up.
I'm like a natural optimist, so I just always have to find like some type of silver lining in things, maybe to my own detriment.
No, it's a relief. It's a relief, and I always have this way of sort of like dragging the whole thing back down into a leaden cloud, kind of, you know. No, it's been really intense, but I guess things, at least in the United States, things have almost gotten to the worst point that they could get. And so the only way is back up, maybe, hopefully.
I think so. I think this is our rock bottom, you know, moment.
Yeah. Don't say that. Don't say that. Because, you know, it's like saying, you know, the parking's good or the traffic's good. Let's just all just hold tight, right?
Just hold tight, exactly.
We don't want
to keep your wits about you. Yeah.
I'm interrupting you a second to thank Marco and Lee, because I didn't before, giving us a platform, giving us this chance. I'm really grateful to it's been really wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, it's going to be nice to meet you guys in person one of these days when everybody does things in person again.
We're very much looking forward to. I mean, it's been great doing it through Zoom these past few months. It's not, you know, it's not in person. And so, yeah, we'll be back at Dixon Place someday.
Yeah. Hang in there.
You too, and thank you for staying up so late, Andrea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll probably have insomnia now, but it's okay. Okay. Take care, everybody.
Thanks
It's
so
been
much.
Bye.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.